Green Scene on The Pat Kenny Show. Sponsored by ESB. Working towards a brighter energy future. ESB.ie.
And our guest for Green Scene is Dr. Ruth Freeman, Director of Science for Society at Science Foundation Ireland. Ruth, good morning.
Good morning, Anton. Happy Science Week.
Well, why, thank you, and happy Science Week to you too. Can we start with this? There was an article in the New Scientist, which is having interesting ripples in effect, because it has said that some of what is being done in the desire to go vegan may be actually bad for people's health rather than good.
That's right, Anton. There was an article a couple of weeks ago which looked at the health benefits of veganism. And as we all know that, veganism is a big trend at the moment. The number of vegans in Ireland has doubled in the last couple of years. And most people do that for environmental reasons and for animal welfare reasons. But health is a big factor in people choosing a vegan lifestyle. And what this report looked at was, what are vegans actually eating? And what's transpiring is that, in fact, a lot of vegans are substituting into their diet highly processed foods, which are looking like they're probably not going to be very healthy. So we thought it'd be good to talk about and see, well, if we're going to take on this healthy, this lifestyle, which is good for the planet, how can we make sure it's also healthy?
Well, on that topic, whenever there's obviously a spectrum of veganism. At one end, you have pasta pomodoro, which is just a food that happens to be vegan. On the other hand, when you go down the sort of bacon aisle in the supermarkets and you see the vegan bacon, the construction that must go into making a plant look like a rasher, it's interesting. What are the kind of things that go into that?
Well, again, unsurprisingly, lots of sort of artificial things, sugar, fat, salt, things to kind of replicate the texture of meat. The famous Impossible Burger has an awful lot of those things added, a lot of soya protein and also heme, one of the things that we find in blood to give that meaty texture. So you're right, it's sort of like eating a chemistry experiment if you're going for these things that are trying to replicate something that's meat.
And whatever about what's in them, what about what's not in them? What are the common nutrients that people can miss if they go the wrong way about veganism?
So there's a couple of things that people really need to look out for on a vegan diet. And those things particularly are iron. And again, you can get that from other places in your diet. You can get it from things like green vegetables, beans and pulses and nuts. Calcium as well. Again, you're going to get that from green vegetables. Vitamin B3 is one thing that if you're eating a vegan diet, you will need to get as a supplement, or you'll need to eat in fortified foods. And the other thing is omega-3, a fatty acid. But again, you can get that from things like flax seeds and beans and even seaweed. I think the key thing, though, is, it's important to say the lowest impact animal-based foods when it comes to the planet are worse for the environment than plant-based foods. So there's no doubt that going a vegan route is going to be good for the planet. And in fact, some of the listeners might have seen at COP26, the menus that were there actually had a carbon footprint for all of the dishes on the menu. But we also know, and I think this is where we have to stick to the science, eating highly processed food is not good for us. It definitely increases our risk of early death. It increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. So if we're going to go down that vegan route, it's kind of going back to what our grandmothers would recognize. Let's go for those foods that we recognize as real things. As you said, more down the pasta pomodoro route than the fake bacon route.
While we are talking plants, can I get your view on a thing that I was reading recently that said that plants are not the sort of passive, easygoing creatures that we might think, that they're engaged often in constant conversation with each other?
I know, and it's funny, Anthony, we're learning in recent years that plant communication is far more sophisticated than we thought. So I think a lot of us will have learned in school, and you might not remember the word, but phototropism, the way that plants turn towards or away from light. And we all see that all the time anyway. And we've also known for years that plants respond to stimuli like light, gravity, water, touch. But in the last few years, researchers have found that maybe plants are up to more than we knew. So a study in 2019 found that plants could actually increase the amount of sugar in their nectar when they were exposed to the sound of a bee buzzing by, or maybe produce chemicals that would protect them when exposed to the sound of crunching caterpillars. And in fact, some amazing work over the last few years have shown that fungi, now fungi aren't plants, but they do coexist with plants, that fungi can have these amazing networks of connections under our feet, under the ground in places like forest. And in fact, the trees in the forest are tapping into these fungal networks to communicate with each other. And in fact, some scientists have coined this the wood wide web, because in fact, trees are using this connection between these fungi under their roots to warn each other about things like disease or insect attacks.
Trees are calling each other using mushrooms, in essence.
Trees are online on a mushroom world wide web, Anton. I know, who knew?
And am I right in saying, I remember reading a while ago that the largest organism by geographical scale is a mushroom. That the fruiting body that we see above the ground is only a tiny representation of huge, in some cases, miles of material that lives under the surface.
Yeah. Exactly, and that's the kind of, they call them these mycorrhizal fungal networks, just to give it the scientific term, and they can expand for miles and miles and are a way for communication to happen. So pretty amazing. But we're actually finding it even more, and new research just published last week in the journal Nature Plants found that a plant could actually talk to its neighbour, sending special little molecules, almost like passing notes in class. And in fact, these notes were so sophisticated that they could go into the neighbouring plant and change the way it was doing things. So turn on and off the gene expression in the partner plant. Now, again, we don't know why they're doing this at the moment. Maybe it is to warn each other or to send each other messages, but it could also be for competition. This could also be sort of communication and guerrilla warfare between plants, where they're sort of sending a little message, but in fact that message might decrease the health of the neighbouring plant, so that the plant that sent the message can take advantage of the maybe limited resources in an area. So yes, plants are not passive, and there's all sorts of things going on with plants that we're only beginning to learn about, really.
Amazing. Dr. Ruth Freeman, thank you so much. That is Dr. Ruth Freeman, who's Director of Science for Society at Science Foundation Ireland.